Okay, so I think we're going on air. Meanwhile, I'll say good evening to everyone. Okay, so I think we're and thank you for joining us tonight. The question of how to establish a Palestinian peace narrative is arguably the most critical and complex question facing the Middle East today, at least from my perspective. We know that ignoring the elephant in the room will not lead to a solution. Tonight, we have a unique opportunity to address this very question from a new and vital perspective. I'm honored to welcome our speaker, my friend, Xavier Wordman, a Syrian-German thinker who has dedicated years to this topic. Tom is an expert on Arab and Palestinian history of ideas and a PhD candidate at the Center of Jewish Studies in Heidelberg. Tom will be presenting the same lecture he gives to moderate Muslim audiences, focusing on the urgent need for a new Palestinian peace narrative and a practical step to develop it. This is a crucial conversation for all of us, and I'm grateful to you for your participation. Welcome, Tom.
Very well, thank you, Tom, for inviting me. So the thing is, interestingly, I do not just give this lecture to moderate Muslim audiences. I give this lecture to Muslim audiences in general, including those who have, I would say, very not moderate, but very strong opinions on many things, because this lecture is especially about showing ways towards peace from a position of war and struggle and enmity and communal enmity. It is not there to find, like for moderates, to find a third who's the extremist as an enemy, but rather to show how extremist narratives work, where they come from, but with a clear focus on showing the errors of extremist narratives, even though I would often say that in the end, if we properly analyze the roots of extremist narratives, we find interesting things about, for example, about the roots of extremist narratives, where they actually come from, and how we can fight them. So allow me to start my presentation. Oh, you need to allow me to open.
Yes, allowed.
Okay, 1 second. Oh yeah, now I need to on Zoom. Where is it? What is this? Ah, yeah, here.
Okay.
Microsoft PowerPoint. I hope it's this.
Yes. Looks like it.
Can you see a presentation now?
We can see the bar of the presentation. I think you need to open it.
The problem is that it is opened. And what do you see now?
We see the orange bar of the headline, basically.
Oh, this is a bit weird. Give me a second. Yeah, this is a stop, and now do it anew. Better now?
Yes. Definitely.
Can you see it now as a presentation?
Yes, now it's okay.
Yeah, so the presentation is called Choosing Peace Over Struggle, How to Arrive at a Palestinian Peace Narrative. And it's very long, but it's not going to be as long as this looks. So it's about the struggle narrative of Palestine as an elephant in the room of Arab-Israeli peace, about the alternative to a struggle narrative, and about the ideological roots of the struggle narrative, the first head, the second head, the third head, which are Arab nationalism, Islamism, and sadly the global left, and what those heads of the beast have to do with anti-Semitism, which I call the body of the beast. And then it's about, but this isn't basically open, it's just a short part, is constructing a peace narrative, how to counter this struggle narrative with a peace narrative. So the struggle narrative of Palestine as an elephant in the room of Arab-Israeli peace. I say this because for a time, especially in what we might call the high phase of the Abraham Accords era, when there was like this enthusiastic idea about Middle Eastern integration, which now is has lost a lot of the enthusiasm. There was the idea that, and this is a good symbol of this is the picture on the right, that Muslims, Arabs, Iranians, Israelis, Jews could make peace just without the Palestinians even being there. I think that is not true. I think this has hit us back. The idea that this could work has shown to be a bit short-sighted. And one of the reasons for that is that for me as a Muslim, but also for other Muslims, Palestinians are real and they are our Muslim brothers and sisters. So we can't just forget them. Let me give you an example. Is it thinkable that the state of Israel, in order to maintain good relations with the United States of America, would abandon a community of Jews, let's say in a country like Mexico, to their fate, to a fate of struggle or death or oppression or suffering, just because they want to keep up their good relation with the United States? No, the state of Israel couldn't do that. That would contravene the original reason the state was founded for, which is to protect Jews. And so from a Muslim perspective with Palestinians, it's a bit similar. Even if you say that Palestinians have bad political leadership or actually are acting in a negative way, negative for themselves, negative for others, you can't just say you forget about them. This will not work, because that also destroys one of the social foundations of Middle Eastern societies, which is the idea of solidarity, Muslim Arab solidarity, and Jews do the same. They do national religious solidarity with other Jews. So I would say they can complain about that. And I would say we cannot make peace without also thinking of the Palestinians. One reason for that is because actually Palestinian extremist organizations have the power to spoil that process, as we clearly saw on October 7th of 2023. So now, but the problem, what is actually the problem? Yeah, the problem is that Palestinians often believe in bad ideologies and follow bad leaders. So there is a problem with, as someone like Einat Wilf, who I usually disagree with about everything, would call Palestinianism a specific quality of ideology that is dominant politically among Palestinians and that is making peace much harder, or actively spoiling peace between Muslims and Jews, peace between Israelis and Arabs and Middle Easterners. But it is very noteworthy that most of those ideologies, if we trace them as ideas, do not come from Palestine. They're not. They might have been adopted by Palestinian militant organizations, but they did not arise in Palestine. A good example is this guy. This guy is the inventor of the term Nakba, which means catastrophe in Arabic, and of course refers to the fleeing or expulsion of Palestinians during the Israeli War of Independence of 1948. He invented this term Nakba, but he wasn't a Palestinian. He was a Syrian, and we're going to talk about him in a short time. And that's just an example of what I mean. So Palestinians often believe in bad ideologies and follows bad leaders. I mean, this is very obvious. Yahya Sinwar here. But this guy, Constantine Zoreik, who invented some of those bad ideologies that are still influential for a guy like Sinwar, he was a Syrian Christian. He was not a Palestinian, he was not a Muslim, he was a Syrian Christian. Okay, so the thesis of the extremist, or the struggle narrative and the peace narrative, is that I would say today's anti-Jewish ideologies around the world are rooted in modern and secular ideas. Traditional Islam is not really the big problem here. Traditional Islamic cultures did not believe in modern revolutionary struggle in the way that Hamas is waging it. Allow me to use an example, I'm going to return to it. A traditional Arab tribal leader, let's say a Bedouin sheikh, a sheikh of a Bedouin, Ashira, a Bedouin community. Can you imagine that a Bedouin sheikh would ever lead his community into a struggle of the self-destructive kind that Hamas has waged from Gaza, that can lead to the destruction of the whole community? That is impossible. Yeah? And that is because traditional ideologies, you might call them whatever, xenophobic or hierarchical or patriarchal, that all of that may be very true, but they did not believe in this kind of struggle, this kind of warfare. We're going to talk more about it. And I would say that Palestinians obviously suffer most from the struggle, as can clearly be seen in Gaza. I mean, obviously, Israelis also suffer from it, and it is directed against Israelis, not against Palestinians. But when it just comes to the pure human suffering, then Palestinians are definitely suffering most from it. Yeah, so Palestinians would, this is written here, if we want to construct the peace narrative, Palestinians would gain most from peace. What does this peace narrative actually mean? It means peace with the Jews is possible, because this is a core problem. It's the idea that many people who believe in the struggle narrative believe that peace with the Jews and Israel is simply an impossibility. Even if you would attempt it, it wouldn't work. This is what many people are convinced of. And I would also say that making peace with enemies is an Islamic value. There are many hadith from the Prophet Muhammad, there are quotes from the Quran that speak about peace with making enemies, different enemies. Can be Jews, can be non-Jews, can be Christians. And last but not least, Palestinians would gain most from this peace. So they are the ones who would gain the most prosperity, in my opinion, from actual peace between Israelis and Palestinians. So, but what are the ideologies that form the struggle narrative? I call it the three-headed hydra and its body. Arab nationalism, global leftism, and Islamic extremism. And the body of the beast is the anti-Semitic narrative. Yeah, so I've chosen this comic depiction to show you what I mean. This is very important. I would say that they all deal in the same underlying ideology in a way, but they have different heads. The first head of the three-headed hydra of extremist ideas of Palestine is Arab nationalism. Arab nationalism saw Arab-Israeli wars not as a humanitarian catastrophe for the Palestinians, but as a political catastrophe for Arab nationalism. I already mentioned to you this guy, Constantin Zoreik, this guy here. He invented the term Nakba, and he wrote this book, Ma'na al-Nakba, the meaning of the catastrophe, already in 1948, where he doesn't speak at all about Palestinian refugees. He just mentions them once. But what he's speaking about, what he means with Nakba, is that the loss of the war of 1948 represents a civilizational failure for the Arabs because they have not managed to unite and not managed to modernize enough to win this war. Yeah. So, and he says because the Arabs need to return to history, they need to unite themselves, and for that they need victory over Israel. So victory over Israel becomes the yardstick by which by which Arab civilization should measure itself. Yeah. So the Arab nationalist narrative cannot accept peace with Israel because it needs a victory in order to feel a justification for its own existence. That's the yardstick against which it is measured. It is the goal of the project. Without this victory, the whole project doesn't even make sense. Yeah, you see what I mean? And also Arab nationalists accepted anti-Semitic narratives from Europe en masse and introduced actual kind of Nazi-grade anti-Semitism to Arab discourses that had not been there before. The second head of the three-headed hydra of extremist ideas is Islamism. Muslim Islamists saw Arab-Israeli wars not as a humanitarian catastrophe for the Palestinians, but as a political catastrophe for the Islamic Ummah. And Muslim extremists dreamed of a return to history for the Islamic Ummah through power and victory. That is, as you can see, exactly the same that Arab nationalists believe. One of my theses is that the Islamist idea of Jews, Israel, Palestine is almost exactly the same as the Arab nationalist one. It just transformed from Arab nationalism into Islamism for reasons of regional ideology, but the idea remained the same. It is the idea there's a civilization, it's Islamic civilization, it is disunited, it needs to unite, and to show that it is united and strong and modern, it needs to defeat Israel. The way that Israel came to signify this is actually, I would say it has, for the first of it has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. It is simply because that's a fact. Israel was founded in the heart of the Arab world by a group of migrants, mostly from Europe, who came there and said, now we want to take this land. That's simply true. Whether you argue this is legitimate or not, from the Islamist, from the Arab nationalist perspective, it was like this: a group of European settlers, small in number, come and take a land from the heart of the Arab world, from the heart of the Muslim world. And that is factually true. Yeah? You can argue, of course, I personally, of course, would say that it would have been an immense achievement, of tolerance and peace building if, at least after the Holocaust, the Arabs and Muslims had managed to agree to the idea that Jews needed a refuge. And the chance is pretty high that then now we would actually have a binational one-state solution of the kind that many pro-Palestine leftists pretend to dream of. But that is just that's just a detour. So from an Islamist perspective, Palestine is the place where Muslim unity needs to assert itself. Yeah, for the same reason, Islamists don't want compromise. They need victory, not for the Palestinians, but for themselves. Yeah. Also, Muslim extremists accepted anti-Semitic narratives from Europe en masse. So, for example, this book, معركتنا مع اليهود, from the famous Islamist Sayyid Qutb, it is full of quotes from Islamic scriptures that Qutb basically grabbed out of old books that hadn't been read for hundreds of years in a way. I'm exaggerating, but you see what I mean? Quotes that had not any political use for forever, basically. But most of the anti-Semitism in the book is from Europe. Yeah, the ideas. What are the Jews? The Jews as a global symbol of capitalism, of liberal ideas, of unveiling women, of gambling and prostitution. That's from Europe. Yeah? The third head of the three-headed hydra of extremist ideas of Palestine is the global left. So the global left, for several reasons, sees. Oh, give me a second. Yeah. For several reasons, sees Israel as the embodiment of colonialism and imperialism. This idea mostly comes from the Cold War. I do not want to go into details how that is. It is not purely a Soviet info-op like Isabel Tabarovsky has claimed. It is complicated, but this is not the point. And I want to point out at this point the Palestinian Arab nationalist and also leftist view that sees Zionism as a colonial rule. I think it's wrong, but it is not completely unlogical. Yeah, the idea that Zionism is a colonial movement from Europe, you can argue a lot about it, but believe me, I have studied this a long time. I have written an article mostly against this notion, but it is not like an outrageous idea. If you follow a certain way of Marxist interpretation, you can actually argue this in a quite logical way, which does not mean that I agree. Yeah, because I think the premises of this argument are wrong, but if you agree to certain premises about imperialism, anti-imperialism, colonialism, then you can make this argument. And leftists believe that imperialism must be defeated in Israel-Palestine. Yes, so in order to create a better world, to create a more just world, a world without hierarchies, imperialism, which is a global power against the emancipation of humans, needs to be defeated in Israel-Palestine because that's the place where Western colonialism has sent its spear tip into the oppressed nations of the world, and you need to break off this spear tip. So the leftist solution for oppression is revolution. Yeah? The leftist solution to a situation of oppression is revolution. Look at this picture here. The symbolism of an ideology. Anger is the solution. How do you change the world for better? With revolution. What is revolution? An uprising of the masses united in anger. Yeah? So from a Marxist perspective, not from a theoretical Marxist perspective, but from the perspective of classical actual communists, movement communists, the proletariat cannot ever even be angry enough. Yeah? All their anger is good. Yeah? When the oppressed are angry, it is by itself a value. They don't see the idea that the oppressed, you see it has gone dark around me because, yeah, I mean, there's no light in this room. I can change it. There's no electricity here. I'm sitting in a house with fire damage. The electricity is turned off. I'm actually in a pretty difficult situation here currently.
It's a commando lecture.
I mean, I'm in Germany. There was no war here. There was simply like an accident in a normal house that caused a fire, and now the electricity is turned off. And actually, probably I shouldn't be here with the smoke, with the residue of smoke still all around me. But yeah. So leftists see Israel. Yeah.
I'm saying so. Let's wrap it up shortly.
Yeah. So leftists. Oh, are we short on time?
No, but only on your account.
Ah, come on, it doesn't matter. I'm young. So leftists see Israel as an oppressive state that makes the world worse, and they believe the solution for this is revolution. So see this. What you need to understand about this picture, this red picture here, is the word completely. Completely smash the capitalist class. Yeah? Completely smash the capitalist class. And now take a look. You see that? That's the same symbolism. And that's not a coincidence. It's the idea that the world will be made better when the oppressed masses rise up and destroy their oppressor. So I always say, if we want to understand how pro-Hamas leftists, how leftists who support Hamas, how leftists who support the violent destruction of Israel, how they see Israel, the comparison that is often used to Hitler, Nazis, makes no sense. This is not how they think of it. They see Israel like Vladimir Lenin thought of the Russian aristocracy and bourgeoisie. An oppressive class that needs to be destroyed so the world can become a better place. And there is no other way. You can't make a compromise with it. Not necessarily even because they would never agree to a compromise, but because you need to transform the world into a better state. And the way to transform the world to a better state is violent revolution. And this idea was thrown into Arab societies that were, it was also widely accepted in Arab societies that were just newly arriving into modern mass politics, that were going through multiple crises, that had been colonized and found root and has led to terrible consequences. I want to note at this point, I mean, when I criticize this ideology, angers the solution. The oppressed can never be angry enough. Yeah, revolution is this guy that you're seeing being killed here, the man lying down, the man with the ultra-Orthodox hat. He carries a gun and he wears a uniform. That means he's a soldier. And what you see in the background is actually the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which according to widely held views in international law is occupied Palestine, is occupied West Bank and should belong to a Palestinian state. I mean, so from the perspective of international law, you could construct the idea that what this guy is doing here is actually legitimate self-defense. Yeah? I would disagree with that for two reasons. First, because this guy is not a regular soldier. He's an irregular, and irregulars don't have a right under international law to commit warfare. But I just want to point out, this is not just a random guy slaughtering a Jew. It is a Palestinian killing a soldier in what is seen as illegally occupied territory by large parts of the international community. My core point of this is, I don't give a fuck, I don't give a damn if this is legal or not. I want to criticize the narrative. I want to say, I don't care if it is legal under any circumstances to do this. I think the narrative behind it, the reason why people do it, if it's legal or not. I mean, there are many things that could be constructed as legal that are still terrible and lead to terrible results. I just want to say, I concentrate here not on saying, oh, look how evil this is. A Jew is being slaughtered. This is a soldier being attacked. But I would still say it's terrible to say that the way towards a better future for Palestinians is to slaughter Jewish soldiers on the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I want to find different ways to a future, because I believe this cannot be a better future. Just to point this out, this perspective is totally different from the traditional Islamic and Arab politics. As I already pointed out, traditional tribal leaders, traditional city leaders like the Wujaha of a Medina, like the notables of an Arab city, would never start a war of the way that Hamas started in Gaza. They would always choose the option. They would flee. They would make a deal with a stronger power. They would always try to uphold the structure of the community. They would react conservatively. They would not react revolutionary like Hamas does. Yeah, the way that Hamas thinks of this war is more similar to the picture on the downstairs. You see all of those people moving into one direction, yeah, with one goal, trying to bring paradise on earth through struggle. They don't see oppression or whatever as something that you need to structure into a religious cosmology, but as something that you need to overcome in order to create paradise on earth, which is a wholly modern idea. Okay, so the body of the beast is anti-Semitism. How is that? How are those three ideologies connected through anti-Semitism? Anti-Semitism is a certain narrative. It's not simply a hatred. This is the most important thing to understand. You can be an anti-Semite without hating Jews. Yeah? For example, most of those pro-Hamas leftists believe that they actually represent true Judaism and that if you destroy Israel, Jews will profit from it. Most of them believe. This is not true, but they don't just hate Jews. But they certainly believe in the anti-Semitic narrative, because anti-Semitic narrative is a story we tell about the world to understand what is happening in the world. The core idea is the world is bad because of Jewish power. Freeing the world from Jewish power is liberation. The Arab nationalist, Islamist, and leftist narratives of Palestine have all similarities, deliberately or not deliberately, with this story. They all believe that there's a Jewish power, and if you remove this Jewish power, the world becomes a better place. Israel is this Jewish power. Arab nationalists believe the world becomes a utopia of unity and prosperity for Arabs. Islamists believe then the world will become a utopia of unity and prosperity for Muslims. And leftists believe that this is the way for a revolution that will lead all of humanity towards utopia, prosperity, liberation. I have a very good example for this. Look at this. This is a picture. This is a poster. This was held up at the German university about a year ago. My friend Nathan showed it to me. It was very, very smart. Look at this. This is doves of peace breaking through a fence. I mean, this also looks like a kufiya, but he asked the people specifically, doves of peace with the Hamas symbol. This is the red triangle used by Hamas, breaking through the fence to commit October 7th massacre, but they're doves of peace. How is that true? How is it possible that you would literally say war is peace? This big poster and the slogan, it says war is peace, because they believe if you remove the Jewish power from the world, you will actually live in peace. War against Israel is a war for peace. It's utopian. It's even progressive in a way. Yeah? That is because anti-Semitism is not the same as racism. It is not the idea that we as humans are separated into different hierarchies. It is actually the idea that the Jews have created hierarchies that make our lives worse. Yeah? It is not hierarchy. For example, Israelis who dislike Palestinians or even hate Palestinians, they would often speak in a narrative of hierarchy. Yeah? Jews on top, Palestinians below. Palestinians and leftists especially would usually not speak like this. They would rather say Israel and Jews have created the hierarchy that makes the world a worse place. We just want to destroy this hierarchy, then we can all live in peace together. Yeah. So to understand the idea of Jews as the enemy of everybody, we need to understand the ideological structure of anti-Semitism as a liberation struggle and as humanism, as I just said. So look at this letter. This letter was written by a Turkish fascist in 1941. So he was like a Turk, but he was an atheist and a fascist in a way. He wrote to his son, my son, the Russians, Chinese, Persians, and Greeks are our historic enemies. The Bulgarians, Germans, Italians, Englishmen, Frenchmen, Arabs, Serbs, Croats, Spaniards, Portuguese, and Romanians are our new enemies. The Japanese, Afghans, and Americans are our enemies of the future. The Armenians, Kurds, Circassians, Abkhazians, Bosniaks, Albanians, Pomaks, Laz, Lesbians, Georgians, and Chechens are our internal enemies. So an endless list of enemies. It's like a parody of a nationalist sentiment. This guy has 100 enemies, but then, oh, am I still? Hello? No. Hello?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Okay, because I saw for a second, for a second I thought that my connection was breaking off.
No.
So he has all those enemies. Yeah. Go on.
Yes. Continue.
Tom? Yeah.
Yes.
But then in the end, he says the Jews are the secret enemies of all people. What does that mean? That means that national enmity can change according to shifts in time and space. So you see here, historic enemies, current enemies, tomorrow enemies. That enmity can change. Enemy can start, it can change, yeah? They were enemies of yesterday, enemies of tomorrow. That means that they're probably not even enemies of now. The second axis is the high number of enemies and the small number of enemies. So this number of enemies can change. Turks can have more enemies, they can have less enemies. But the Jews are the secret enemies of all people. That means the enmity can change because it's secret. You can never prove the Jews are not the enemy. And they're the enemy of all people. That means this guy hates Persians, Spaniards, Afghans, and Kurds as a Turk. But he hates Jews as a human being because they're the enemies of all people. for him, anti-Semitism is almost like a form of humanism. You see, this is the specific structure of anti-Semitism. Yeah? It's the belief that the world, for all of us, can be a better place if there's no Jewish power anymore. And this is one of the reasons why the Palestinian struggle narrative has such a strong tendency for, wait a second, such a strong tendency for the idea of radicalization instead of compromise. So let's watch this video. And before I show this video, I need to show you, tell you very clearly that this kind of content exists in the Arab world. It's a video from Yemen. It's a children's series. But after October 7th, I have seen some not dissimilar videos from Israel too, and I have heard stories from friends from Israel, school teachers who have told me that in Israeli schools you can find talk not entirely different from what I'm going to show you in this video. And for example, after October 7th, there was a video that had been posted for a short time on the Khan News website of Khan News. There was also, I found terrible, where you have a choir of children singing about annihilating Gaza. And I would say that this is probably equivalent. And this kind of content does not have that many viewers, as it also in Israel, there's just a very small segment of the population that would have such extremist views. But I want to go to something different. So when you see this video, don't just think, oh, how evil are the Arabs? It's about something different. Yeah, this content, the views, I mean, I would say like more than half of the views this video has on YouTube come from Israelis who actually were angry about this, who were hate clicking this video because it got shared a bit on social media. The subtitles aren't. Can you hear it anyway? First of all, Tom,
Yes.
can you hear it?
Yes.
Yeah, but it's in German. It's in German. I have to translate the video. I didn't write English subtitles. This is stupid. I forgot it. I wrote Arab subtitles and German subtitles. Even though I have given this lecture several times in English, I forgot it. I already always translated it then privately afterwards.
لابد أن تعلموا أن العالم كان كله يكره اليهود
The whole world
ولا
hated the
يتقبل
Jews.
العيش معهم حتى في أوروبا
Couldn't live with
لسوء
them.
أخلاقهم وغدرهم وخيانتهم واحتكارهم للسلع والبضائع في أوقات
They
الشدة
exploit the people.
فالجميع لا يستطيع العيش معهم
They couldn't
أو
live with them.
تقبلهم.
That's true.
صحيح كان
My
جدي
grandmother told
يحدثني
me.
عنهم وأنهم
Yeah, my
أخذوا
grandfather.
منا القدس وفلسطين لقد
I read
قرأت
about
عنهم متشوق لما سنعرفه عن كيف نشأت الصهيونية ستساعدنا أيها
dear
الهدهد في معرفتهم أكثر ونعرف
Tell us
كيف
about
نواجههم.
So this is a Yemeni children's series about a group of kids that are traveling back in time with a magical bird, a hudhud. Also the national bird of Israel, as far as I know. They're traveling in time to learn about the Zionist world conspiracy. That's a terrible video. It's for children. I mean, Yemen, country with starvation and war, and children are learning. Actually, they travel in the past to witness that Lieutenant Dreyfus was a spy for Germany in the 19th century, the Dreyfus affair. So what do Yemeni children, why do they need to know about the Dreyfus affair, that the Jews were actually traitors? What does it change about their life? It's terrible and it's crazy. Yeah. But more than this, more interesting than this content is the reaction I had from some Muslim friends to this video. I showed them this video and they said, one of my friends who's a university professor said, this video, it's not Islamically correct, it's bad, but talking about a cartoon series during a genocide is propaganda. Other one, a pediatrician, a doctor, told me this video is bad, but I can forgive our brothers the behavior in the current time. Why are you even talking about this? So both actually agreed that this video is bad. They wouldn't condone it. They would never show it to their children. But they say this radicalization is not our fault. It comes from a reaction to Zionism. So many Muslims, even when they're ready to acknowledge radicalism, extremism, from Muslims, from Palestinians, they would say it's a reaction to Zionism. They don't see that our own extremism plays a role in creating and upholding this conflict also, because they say it's reactive. And I would say this has something to do with the core idea that you just cannot make peace with the Jews. It's a modern European idea. And even if people don't know it, it works in many of the ideas that are spread around Israel. Yeah, people often don't know it. They don't hate Jews. They just believe in political ideas that the original inventors, like Sayyid Qutb, the Islamist, Constantine Zoreik, the Arab nationalist, yeah, they believed that you cannot make peace with the Jews, and they were open anti-Semites. So people now today might not even know that, but they know the ideas of Zoreik and Qutb. They are transformed through the ages. Of course, they might have never even heard of Constantine Zoreik or Sayyid Qutb, but the ideas those guys at the time are still powerful today. They just hear them from TikTok, yeah, from people who have also never heard from Constantine Zoreik ever, but they have heard from their ideas from Al Jazeera. The TikTok guy reads Al Jazeera website. The Al Jazeera website journalist has studied in an Arab university, and his old professor, he knows about Sayyid Qutb. This is how those kind of ideas get transmitted. And the guy watching it on TikTok is 4 or 5 degrees removed. Yeah, we have the old Arab leftists who knows Constantine Zoreik, who's a professor at an Arab university. He teaches some guy who's an Al Jazeera journalist. The Al Jazeera journalist writes his articles, makes his video. This gets taken by a political influencer who turns it into a TikTok video, and then young people watch it. This is how it works. It's very bad. So I will make this very short. Constructing a peace narrative. How do we arrive at a better narrative? I would say the first step is deconstructing the struggle narrative, and the second step is constructing the peace narrative. So, for example, this is a photo when I was lecturing in a mosque for Muslim university students in December 2024. That was called Peace for Palestine. Yeah, I went to that mosque, and the people there were gathering money for Gaza. They were gathering donations. They were gathering thousands of euros to give to people in Gaza. And I actually also gave money, but I said, I'm going to talk about peace for Palestine, not more struggle. I will not say why, in the face of genocide, our Palestinian brothers and sisters need to intensify their struggle. No, I want to say how we can arrive at peace. And why does peace in our community so often means more war? Oh, that's because we believe peace can only come after Israel is defeated. Why do we believe that? I mean, of course, okay, Israel stole the country, whatever, but there's many such things happening in history. Countries change the owner, nation states emerges, nation states fall all the time. There's many bad things happening. Why is this the one place where we really cannot agree that there can never be peace? I would very clearly say that Israel takes definitely also some of the responsibility for that, and I would be prepared to argue about this pretty sharply. But from our Muslim side, there's, as I just explained for a long time, for over half an hour, also a large part of the problem. And I try to explain this to Muslim audiences. So one of the things, for example, I do is I try to give Muslims empathy for Zionism. That does not mean that I want to turn them into Zionists. Yeah? Or as I said, I say it sometimes jokingly to Jewish or Israeli friends. I say, my personal project is to turn all Muslims in the world into Meretz, or at least Hadash voters. Yeah? You see what I mean? If all Muslims were either Meretz or voters of Hadash, or as you would say in Hebrew, I think Hadash, if all Muslims were Hadash voters or Meretz voters in the world, there would be no war. Yeah? There would be no war. You would have actually peace. Of course, you would still have people you disagree with a lot, but there wouldn't be war. The leaders of Gaza do not believe in the ideology of Meretz, which is leftist, Zionism, two-staterism, whatever. Yeah. So I do not go to Muslims and tell them, we should always understand what the Israelis are doing. I tell them, we should understand the existential perspective of Israelis in order to have a shared perspective for discussion and peace with them. So, for example, I often tell them if Muslims were Jews, we would be doing the same thing. I had this with Muslim audiences, and I told them about the pogroms in East Europe. Yeah, I told them about the poem In the City of Slaughter by Nachman Chaim Bialik. I read the poem with them about the horror after a pogrom, about the feeling of helplessness of diasporic Jews. And I asked them, as Muslims, would you do the same that Bialik did, which is becoming a Zionist? Dreaming of a place where where Jews can, or Muslims in this case, can defend themselves? And of course, he would say yes. They would all say yes. Muslims would say yes. We would want to defend ourselves. I do this with school classes. I do this in mosques, with Muslims associations. Everybody always say we would defend ourselves. And then I would say, now you have understood Zionism. Doesn't mean you need to like it, but it's something you can understand at least. And when you can understand that Zionism is not coming necessarily from a place of racism, hatred, or it's just an imperialist conspiracy to control Palestine, but that it comes from a perspective that we can understand, share even, then we can think of peace with the Israelis. Yeah, that doesn't mean that I ask them to agree with the Israeli warfare in Gaza, or that I should tell them it's so great that Israel occupies the Golan Heights. No, this is not my business. I might even disagree with many Israelis on those issues, but that does not mean that I want more war. So when I was talking to a friend who's living in Judea and Samaria in a village, and he has a beard and he wears a kippah, you know, like one of those guys, and I said them some very, very harsh things, like sometimes aggressive, like mocking some parts of his identity and his ideology. But then I said, it was very important for me, I said, all of this does not mean that I want you killed or the village that you live in destroyed. I want to make peace with you. I want to discuss with you, and I have many political disagreements with you, but I want to solve them in a manner of peace and not in a manner of war. And too many Arabs that do dialogue with Israelis. I don't know. Should I name any names? No, probably not. I mean, like, if use a very extreme example, no, I should not name any names. Too many of them just, yeah, no, I don't want to. Too many Arabs just switch the side. They just change sides. They change from one aggressive narrative into another one. They don't leave the struggle narrative. They just don't join an Israeli struggle narrative. Yeah, they for some reasons don't like Arab societies, whatever. They like the Israeli way of life. They stop believing in Islam. They believe in an idea of purely national interest, and in the national interest, of course, often close cooperation with Israel would be better. And then, for example, they start to hate Palestinians, and I say, no, this is not correct. Or they hate Muslims, and I say, no, this is not the right way. Yeah, and Israelis are not enough in contact with Arabs or Muslims who actually want to live in peace with Israelis without joining Israelis who have their own self-conscious identity and don't just want to become like yay-sayers for Israelis, because this is a phenomenon from the Middle East. Arabs also always believe in, like, they see pictures from Neturei Karta and believe all religious Jews hate Zionism. Yeah? Because in this region, communication between people is so low that it's very easy to believe in a narrative from the other side, even though it is not representative at all, just because you don't even know what the other side is talking about to begin with. Yeah, you simply don't know what the others are saying, so you can be easily persuaded if someone comes, yeah, like let's say a Lebanese comes and say, all Lebanese hate the Palestinians. That's not true at all. That's not true at all. Yeah, but if you don't have much contact with Lebanese, you might be inclined to believe it. Yeah. So I would say we should try to create not a football game. I'm not the kind of Muslim or Arab who wants to draw people from the football game from the Palestinian side to the Israeli side. I want to help end the game. If that's, I know I will never be able to succeed, but I try to do it. Okay. I should probably come to an end. Yeah, I do come to an end. This is the last slide I say. So another idea I give to people is the idea of, I call, why have the Hutu and the Tutsi stopped trying to throw each other, the other side of the sea? I say there are examples of very, very brutal conflict in the history of the world where there was peace found. Yeah? Now you might say, of course, only after the evil people have been defeated or whatever, but the idea that violence and enmity needs to be eternal, that's simply untrue. In Rwanda, what happened in Rwanda and the Rwandan genocide, and actually in the decades before, there were many massacres in Rwanda and in Burundi between Tutsi and Hutu. After terrible genocide, that was a lot worse than October 7th, and that also was a lot worse than the current Gaza war, however you look at it, in terms of, like, let's say, people killed. In Rwanda, there was peace building after genocide. It was possible. It was simply possible, yeah? And if it was possible there, it can also be possible between Israelis and Palestinians. I don't care how it looks. I will not go into this discussion. Yes, but Judea and Samaria are Jewish, or no, but we need one unified Palestinian state, or we need a two-state solution according to the 1967 armistice line, or according to the Clinton parameters, or to the Olmert's proposition from 2008. I don't want to go into it. I just want to go. I want to give people a mindset that peace is better than war. Yeah, or the Soviet Union and Germany. I'm sometimes say jokingly, Joseph Stalin would be a moderate both in Israel and in Palestine, because he said during World War II, the Hitlers come and go, but the German people remain. Now, if a Palestinian says the Bibi Netanyahus or the Ben Gvirs come and go, but the Israeli people remain, that would definitely make him a moderate. And in the current situation, if an Israeli says the Yahya Sinwars come and go, but the Palestinian people remain, I think that would also kind of indicate that he's a leftist. Yeah. So I want to say, like a bit of jokingly, even Joseph Stalin, who believed in coexistence with Germany after World War II, was a moderate in a way. More moderate than many Israelis and Palestinians. That should give food for thought. The third idea is South Africa, where after a very bad apartheid, where clear oppression, it's not very well working currently, I know this, but there was a clear vision of peace and saying we should get over the violence and negativity of the past. Yeah? We need to change this. We need to overcome this and do better in the future. And this is also something that could work in Israel-Palestine. Yeah, and as I said, I don't subscribe to those. I don't want to give any conditions for that. I don't. Some say to realize that we need Zion to destroy Zionism. Others say we need something. I just want to say peace is possible if people believe that peace is possible with the other side, and I want to help to do that. And I also consciously don't want to say, for example, when I say Rwanda, you can believe in my Rwanda example when you believe that Hamas, I mean, I don't want to even say it's wrong. If you believe that Hamas committed genocide on October 7th, you can still argue, well, in Rwanda there was also genocide. And nobody has ever said that in Rwanda there should be no peace. Who has ever said, no, there should be no peace between Hutu and Tutsi in Rwanda? No, nobody ever says this. Yeah? That means, yes, after October 7th, of course, there can be peace between Israelis and Gazans. On the other hand, even if you believe that the Israeli army is committing genocide in Gaza, if you believe that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, you can still believe, as in the case of Rwanda, that peace is possible. Yeah, we have seen it in cases with even many more victims. Yeah, so this is the kind of mindset I want to give. Okay, I think that's enough for now, even though I would have many, many more slides, but that is not so important, probably. Yeah, I thank you, and let's see if we're going to go, I don't know, into discussion, whatever. Yeah, thank you.
So first of all, are you up to it? Because I know that you're in a bit of a field condition. So are you able?
No, I'm absolutely up to it. Just allow me. I need to switch. I need to turn my screen brighter again. So because currently it's dark because I changed because it's the dark Zoom window now open, so you can probably not see me properly anymore.
We can see you in a reasonable way.
Yes. No. I try to. I put a Word document in the background, so there's a white background to my screen now. As I said, yeah, probably I see that on the YouTube screen there are some more people watching than before. So there was a fire in my mother's house, so there's no electricity currently here, so I'm sitting in the dark. And I probably shouldn't even be in this house, but yeah.
But the main thing is that you're safe, and we appreciate it. So first of all, we won't stretch this discussion too much, but first of all, if people from the crowd want to ask questions, so please, you can ask for permission to speak. Tamar, you can start. Go ahead.
I have a question. It's about the leftist side of the anti-Israel movement. I don't know how to put it, but I was going to say, can you explain a little bit about how, because I feel on a strictly Marxist perspective, you could say that Israel has like perhaps a stronger left, or at least it has a communist party, you know, compared to some countries where there are many leftists who are against Israel. But I was going to say, I think you have mentioned before that like Zionism is associated in other countries, like in Germany, with a right-wing elitist position. And I was wondering if you can explain a little bit about that, like in the terms of this revolutionary thing, that the association of Zionism with the anti-revolutionary element in other countries.
Yeah, this was not very like so. Of course, everybody knows after World War II, the left was broadly pro-Israel. Even the Arab communist parties, under directive from Moscow, agreed to the partition plan and to the creation of a Zionist state. And Arab communist leaders actually went out and explained why Zionism was necessary in the current moment. Yeah, Khalid Bakdash. I mean, he was not a very nice guy. He was a Stalinist leader of the Arab Kurdish leader of the Syrian Communist Party. Actually went out there and explained to crowds in Syria why he agreed to the creation of a Jewish state. That's one thing, but after 1967, this changed. This had many reasons. It had the reason that Israel became aligned with the West, Soviet Union got aligned with the Arab world, but also that Israel started like a military occupation of the population in Gaza and the West Bank that clearly plays a role here. And so, of course, so, you know, I just yesterday read a Substack article by someone called Joey Hoffman, I think. Joey Hoffman? I don't know. Joshua Hoffman? No, it's Jewish Future, or a Jewish Future. Future Jewish, that's kind of the name of the Substack. And he said, yes, why did the leftists abandon it? Well, might have something to do with the fact that it's part of leftist doctrine to stand with those they see as weaker. That's literally leftist doctrine, yeah? So it makes total sense from a leftist perspective to say the moment Israel becomes a very powerful nation state, you don't agree with it so much more. Of course, leftists have no problem of standing with power in other contexts, like standing with the Soviet Union, but you need to find for different explanations that are more within the degree of leftist logic. So the thing is, currently, we're seeing a realignment of Israel strongly towards the right in Western societies, especially. So in Western societies, but also in the Arab Gulf, also in Iran, in India, Israel is more and more associated, and many Israelis agree with this. Many Israelis would say, yeah, this is a positive development. Israel is seen as a kind of role model for an ethnic, strong, militaristic society that doesn't accept any bullshit, that throws out people they don't like, that kills their enemies. And so many people say, for example, Christopher Rufo, the famous Republican strategist, just wrote 2 days ago on Twitter, we should be like Israel because Israel doesn't try to bring democracy to anybody. Israel just kills their enemies. I would personally say, for me, this is not very compatible with what I would see as values of Western civilization. And I would say that people like Douglas Murray, who say that Israel is an embodiment of Western civilization, like a version of Israel that I would say is actually dangerous to Israel itself because it is actually Israel leaving the West. That's what I would say. I would say that everywhere currently we're seeing forces that are abandoning what I would very, very, very roughly call the values of Western civilization. I mean, I don't really believe in this idea of like discrete civilizations. I also don't believe that Western civilization is good and all other civilizations are bad. But there are certain ideas that come from Judeo-Christian tradition, from the Greek tradition, from the tradition of French and American Revolution, from modern liberalism, humanism, internationalism. Not all of it is bad. Some of it is actually very good. And we're seeing the left moving away to it. We're seeing parts of the right moving away from it. And so the idea, you can't just be a state where enemies have no rights. You can't just be a state that kills whoever is seen as a problem. Many right-wingers in the West who love Israel actually don't even know Israel that well. For them, Israel is a projective space. Yeah? So, for example, in Germany, you have right-wingers. They say this, I mean, this is like people, you see them, they have thousands of likes for their Twitter posts. They say, this is the point, they say, yes, Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, and that's so great. Because for them, Israel is a projective space. It's just the opposite of what the leftists think of Israel. It's just the opposite projection, yeah? If you invert a shit narrative, it will not get good. It will just put other shit on top. By the way, I think it's very similar to say that Palestinians are Arab settler colonialists. Yeah, the idea Arabs are the true colonizers, like some people write. If you invert the shit narrative, if you invert the shit pile of what is called settler colonial theory, you will end up with the Jews on top. Do you want to be on top of a shit pile? No. It might feel better because you have a bit of fresh air than being down, but it's not the solution. I don't want to play this game. So when you see Western right-wingers loving Israel, quite a few of them, and not all of them, I don't want to generalize this, but quite a few of them actually see in Israel things that even the most right-wing Israelis would think offensive. Yeah. of course, not everybody, and many of them have good relations with the Israelis. But this is an ongoing phenomenon. Yeah, that you would have like German right-wingers, like German keyboard warriors, sitting on the internet saying, "Yes, go Israel, go Israel." Why? Yeah, because you're exterminating Muslims. And then even very right-wing Israelis would say, "Wait a minute, we're not exterminating Muslims." Yeah. So yeah.
Interesting. Tamar, do you have follow-up questions, or are you good? Okay, so first of all, if anyone else from the chat over here on YouTube want to ask something, you can ask for permission, or you can write in the chat and I will read your question if you prefer it. I have a few questions of my own, and basically I would like to take us to the other side of your lecture. Try to be brief about it. So you were speaking as a scholar with a very vast knowledge about those issues from an academic perspective, but I would like to ask you about your personal views now, your personal views regarding Israel, your personal views regarding Judaism that are kind of separate topics, but maybe it's not separated for you, and your personal views about also the things that should be done.
Oh, this is a very, very hard question. So for example, the question is always, are you a Zionist? This is a very often asked question, and I think it's fair to answer this question. I think this heavily depends on what you define as Zionism. So if Zionism means the idea that God has commanded the Jews to create a state in Eretz Israel, I would say that nothing in my religion speaks necessarily against it. I'm a Muslim, but it's also not mandated in my religion. I'm pretty agnostic towards it. And as a secular person, I'm also skeptical in giving religious ideas too much value in politics. Yeah. So, for example, I've already told to Israeli friends to say, but in the Quran, it's mentioned that the Jews shall return to the land. I would say, yes, but I don't so much base my political interpretation, my political opinions on interpretations of individual Quran verses. I base my ethical views very much on that, but not so much my political views, because I believe politics is not the arena where religion is fulfilled. Yeah, I believe that politics will often spoil religion. Second idea is, do I believe that the Jews should have a Jewish state? I would say I can fully understand why they would want to have a state, fully, completely, 100%, without any grain of going against it. I think whether they should have a state, if there was not a Jewish state now, would I help to create one? Probably yes. If there was terrible anti-Semitism in the world, definitely yes. If there was no Israeli state and all Jews would be living in America and we would be like living in America with the climate of, let's say, like 2010, I would probably not have an interest in creating a Jewish state. I wouldn't see why I would do it. If it means about accepting Israel as a Jewish state, because it already exists and because it's important to Israelis, because it's important for Jews, because Jews love it, and because Jews are afraid of what happens to them when they don't have it anymore, I would say I'm a Zionist, yes, in this context, because I have no desire to destroy Israel as a Jewish state. And I actually did dedicate a large part of my personal professional career to fighting people who want to destroy Israel as a Jewish state. Then on the other hand, I would say that if I was an Israeli, I would probably be a Meretz voter. Yeah, so goes clearly very, very strongly on the idea that Israel should become more binational than it is now. That Israel should be should not necessarily be a more secular state. But so, for example, I always tell Israelis, when I think of Israel, I always ask the question, is it good for the Arabs? Yeah? So this is the same question you always ask, of course. Is it good for the Jews? But I say, when I think of Israeli politics, I say, is it good for the Arabs? So, for example, one of my strongest opinions I have about Israel is about the Israeli education system. Yeah, where I would say, I mean, I know it's not like the fact that there's a separated Israeli Jewish Arab school system. It's not proof of apartheid. It's more proof of a Middle Eastern tribalism that I think it's not very good. You can't have an Arab school system that without an Arab university and then an Arab school system that makes it hard to go to a Hebrew university. You know, I mean, this is not right. The state should have done it differently. Yeah, when you have two school systems, you can't just have one ending up in the branch of university and the other one not, and the other one doesn't even prepare you properly to go to an Israeli university. Yeah, so I would say, for example, I would have strong opinions about this, but not because I want to destroy Israel. I don't say this as an accusation, as a ritual accusation. Look at this. Look at what the Jews are doing. I say this because I say, yeah, no, Israelis can do better. Everybody can do better. Yeah, this is kind of my position. So I would be, if I was an Israeli, I would probably vote Meretz. I mean, of course, Meretz doesn't really exist anymore, but you know what I mean. And now we have the Democrats. Yeah, but you see my point.
So if you are in the capacity of consulting the state of Israel and its attempt to create a Palestinian peace narrative, or maybe I would say in its attempt to create a de-radicalized environment between Israelis and Palestinians, what do you think that Israel should do to get more support or more openness or understanding from the Palestinian/Muslim community? Because as you said, it's not the same thing, but in this game it co-depends.
Very hard. So first of all, I know that it's very hard for Israel, and I know that some of the things I'm going to say are simply impossible to easily implement, and it's very hard to demand this of Israelis. So. For example, one thing I would always say is that I know that in the Arab world, I mean, my friend Hussein Mansour has written a brilliant article about it. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has a system. It is a network of geopolitical interests, and many people, many actors in the region have a vital interest in continuing the conflict. Qatar is a good example. Qatar is using this conflict to enhance their own influence. They want this conflict to continue, not just for ideological reasons, but also for power strategy reasons. And if the attack on the Hamas leadership actually failed, as was like the last info a few hours ago, then it probably even let's see if it might end up strengthening them, it might end up weakening them, but yeah, let's see. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah.
So there are interests in this conflict here so they actually don't want peace. Yeah, they don't want not only the ideologues but also the geopoliticians. Yeah, and of course we can say the Hilltop youth in the West Bank also don't want peace because they are hooligans, and hooligans don't want the football game to end where they can then go and beat up other people. You know, so that's difficult. But I would say, when Israelis discuss the fault of Israeli politics for October 7th, they usually say, why was the border meant so badly on October 7th? Yeah? They would say, why was the government giving money to Hamas via Qatar? Or why did we strengthen Hamas in the 1980s at the expense of the PLO because we wanted to split the Palestinian national movement, blah, blah, blah. I would say the bigger problem is even, why was the Islamic University of Gaza opened in the 1970s, or in the late 1970s in Gaza? I mean, Yahya Sinwar, in his autobiographical book, it is all about this Islamic University of Gaza that shaped him. But this was happening under full Israeli occupation. How is that possible? How is that possible? It is possible, of course, because I mean, it would have been extremely hard for Israel to interfere, because the world saw Israeli occupation already then as a scandal, and interference in Palestinian education would have seen as a bigger scandal. But Israelis have this tendency to say this comes from outer constraints, but it also comes from some inner perspective, to say we don't care what our enemies think as long as we can kill them. Yeah, there's the idea Jews are responsible only for Jews. There's the idea anti-Semitism is destiny. We can't change them. They will always hate us. They will always want to kill us. The only responsibility we have is to be better at killing them. I would say this is fatal, and I would actually also say that in a way, many Israelis say they hate us anyway. So when we currently see the global narrative of Palestine as the suffering Jesus at the cross, and I think there is the idea that Palestine is almost like a new Jesus. He's the good of the world, suffering at the cross, crucified by evil in the world, which is Israel. Well, and then Jews say they hate us anyway, but the worst thing Jews can do is actually join this play and becoming the jeering crowd that is laughing while Jesus is suffering, yeah, which is what Israelis are sometimes do when they indulge in enjoying suffering in Gaza, yeah. So when Jews actually show that they're strong and unapologetic, they're not breaking the anti-Semitic narrative. They're actually playing along quite well. Yeah, I don't even say no, Jews should never be powerful. I'm just saying the strong, unapologetic Jew actually fits quite well into the anti-Semitic idea of a cold-hearted, egoistical Jew. Yeah? That does not mean that you should not be unapologetic as a Jew. It's just it's not that easy, yeah. Anti-Semitism is not that easy to understand, that they hate the strong Jew. It is also, I mean, Jews can be strength, can also be bad, yeah. This is something many Israelis say. Western leftists always think strength is bad. They don't understand that strength can also be good. Strength can be self-defense. Strength can be prosperity. But strength can obviously also be evil. I mean, to use the most stupid example, Nazi Germany was quite powerful. I mean, they made war against. I mean, imagine today a country that wages war against Great Britain, France, Russia, and the United States for 6 years. That's quite powerful. But they use this power for very, very bad effect. And so this is danger. This is the current danger for Israel, that Israel becomes kind of like an opposite Palestine. When Palestine is the suffering Jesus at the cross, Israel is the strong soldier standing there in a way, in a narrative way, and I actually, yeah, that's my point.
So I want to take you back for a second to the Islamic universities in Gaza in the 70s. So basically, if I understand correctly what you're implying, you're saying that, okay, so human rights are, of course, play some sort of factor, and national conflicts, they play a role, and everything that has to do with everything plays a role, but you're placing the dot over there in the Islamic universities in Gaza. So first of all, it is my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that religion is a huge part of the problem, or the way it's being taught in specific places is a huge part of the problem, even though you haven't mentioned real concrete, tangible solutions to this problem. And the other thing, so basically, would you say, as a consultant for the Israeli side, that Israel should have interfered in the curriculum, in the education system of the Islamic universities in Gaza, and maybe they should have managed somehow the universities to teach some verses of the Quran rather than the verses that incite, or any other suggestions or differences? That's your point?
Well, I would personally say that, for example, that of course, when I talk to just a few days, I had this conversation in my own family, someone from my own close family, and he's not a very aggressive person. He's also not very aggressively anti-Jewish, but of course he quoted the hadith, the hadith about the battle between the Jews and the Muslims. And I would say, for example, this hadith is actually not so bad if you interpret it correctly. It speaks literally of the end of times. It says there will be a battle in the end of times. What is the end of times? I mean, if you look at the Jewish interpretation of the end of time, what is the tzitzit? What are the meaning of the tzitzit? One of the meaning of the tzitzit is that when the end of time comes, every Jew will have so and so many slaves from among the nations for every tzitzit he wears. So the Abrahamic religions have some like harsh ideas of the end of times. But also Muslims and Jews believe that the end of times will be the time when the most incredible things happen. The sea will be red, and the sky will be red, and the sea will boil, all kinds of things. And of course, there will be battles. Also, there are 1,000 hadith that speak about battles between Muslims in the end of time. So I would say the way those hadith and ayat from the Quran are taught is very political and very modern in nature. So I would say the verses itself are not so much the problem. The problem is what modern ideology are they used to bolster, to support. And I would say
yes to your question. I think Israel should have interfered with this, but I don't say that. I don't say this in a heavy-handed way. I say that the conditions for this in Israel also should have been different at that time. If there was the idea that in the end only peace can be a solution to the conflict, and if there had been an idea that there should be more responsibility for the other side. I know it's very hard to say. You say they're killing us, and we came through the Holocaust. They send us away from the Arab world. They expelled us. The point is, I think politically, I'm pretty much influenced in the end still by Christian ideas from, even though I'm a Muslim, from the West. I would say sometimes there's a ironic. I mean, the Torah is a very ironic book. All the time, Abraham, Moses, they show that the world works in irony. Yeah, and I would say probably, if Israelis had behaved like this, of course, without like as selflessly trying to help the Palestinians get over the struggle narrative, maybe that would have made the chances better that October 7th would have not have happened. I don't know if this is true. I don't know. And actually, I don't even think that this would have been so probable to succeed. As I already said, there are many, many, many actors who, for ideological and geopolitical reasons, don't want this conflict to end. Probably Israel would have been completely powerless to change this narrative. I mean, we see this now, even though I would say that Israel's public relations campaign currently is not very good. It is basically what Israel is currently doing in its public relations campaign. It's gambling on a complete victory of the radical right in the West, but also gambling that this radical right will not be anti-Semitic. So it's gambling on one specific outcome. Yeah. Any leftist victory, any liberal victory in the West by now, and any hardcore right-wing victory in the West will leave Israel worse off. What will win for Israel is if only the kind of libertarian, right-wing, semi-right-wingers like Javier Milei, Javier Bolsonaro, if they win. Yeah? But we already see the younger generation of right-wingers, they're hardcore anti-Semites to a large degree, which might even change the Western right if the older generation of right-wingers is not the majority anymore. So who knows, yeah? And yes, so if I was a consultant for the Israeli government, for example, about Gaza, I have to admit, I am very hawkish on Hamas. There cannot be peace with Hamas. But I would also say, if Israel has no plan for Gaza after the war, if apparently the only plan is destruction, then I don't know what, I don't know. I would definitely say the future should be one of peaceful coexistence. I'm not a policy expert, so I will not say, if I was a consultant to Bibi, I would say you need to follow a two-state solution. If I was a consultant to Bibi, you need to annex Judea and Samaria and grant everybody their residence status akin to East Jerusalem. I would say Israel should help to create a healthy Palestinian identity. And healthy does not mean hasbara. Healthy does mean with self-confidence, with rootedness in their own tradition, but not poisoned by those modern ideologies I tried to detail, which are Islamism, Arab nationalism, and the anti-imperialist version of leftism, which believe that world peace can only come after Israel is destroyed. And if there was, I mean, some people could hear me now, they would probably cancel me, which makes me a bit nervous because, I mean, this is on YouTube. If there was tomorrow a job opening for helping to rebuild Gaza, but in an intellectual way, for me, for example, to work in Gaza and to try to teach my peace narrative, I would quit my job and try to work there tomorrow. This would be something I would love to do. But to do that, I couldn't even be a consultant of the Israeli government, you know. So my personal ambitions run counter to be a consultant for the Israeli government in a way, which interestingly has led me to becoming ever closer to be an advisor to the Israeli government. Because interestingly, even though I say my positions are not meant for Israelis are getting more and more interested in them. So that now, if I would count the number of military officers that I have lectured in front of. Okay, I had the lecture for the German army once. Probably there were more people, but clear second
is the IDF. So clearly the highest number of military officers that have heard my ideas are Israeli ones, even though I would say that my ideas actually are not even meant firstly for Israeli ears. They're firstly meant for Muslim ears, and they're not an affirmation of Israeli identity, but they are trying to reaffirm Muslim identity without enmity to Israel as a core aspect of that identity. Yeah.
Amazing. So first of all, what you're suggesting is a possibility is that Israel or the Jews should, to their own interest, should be involved in the interpretation of the Quran. Now, you know that to most of the Israelis, this idea is very, I would say, is very controversial because we as a nation, we're supposed to be alienated from Quran. But you say you should be, if I understand you correctly, you say you should be a part of the game and you should be involved in how the Quran is being taught, basically.
Look, the problem is that I would not say this. I would say that I would hope that Muslims would do this themselves. But the problem is that the influence of modern revolutionary ideologies in the Muslim world have been so big and also so bad. I mean, it's not always so bad. There are places in the world where leftist revolutionary ideology has had much more positive outcomes. I mean, South America, of course, you can criticize South American leftism a lot, but it's not comparable to the Arab world. The outcomes of specifically leftist ideas are not nearly as bad there as in. No, I would, but then of course it would be very hard to find many Arabs and Muslims who did not believe in those Western ideologies for a long time, and those who didn't are often quite cynical. But I would rather say Israel should have kept their eyes open more for this, and they should have analyzed the ideology closer. I know always there have been Israelis like this. So, for example, I read the books by Yehoshaphat Hakabi. Oh, I hope I pronounce this. This is a weird name. Yehoshaphat Hakabi. I read his books, and his books actually show that this guy, even though he was an Israeli intelligence officer, tries to see what he can understand about Arab narratives, even though at large he's pretty desperate and says, why are they so uncompromisingly hostile? Why don't they believe in positive change? And I would agree with many of the things he said, even though he also had his blindnesses on both sides. But on the other hand, I would also say, maybe this is because my religion is more universalist than Judaism. I wouldn't feel so bad about giving my own interpretation of verses of the Torah, even though, of course, I'm not competent at all in that. I have Muslim friends who are much more competent than me in interpreting verses of the Torah. And I would personally also say Muslims should read the Torah and also the Gospel much more. I would say one of the problems of modern Muslim thought, especially, modern here means the last couple of hundreds of years, actually, since the medieval period, Muslims have cut themselves off far too much from the Abrahamic tradition. They have not read Christian scripture, Jewish scripture enough. They should have keeping on reading the Israeliyat, for example. The Israeliyat, it's an old Muslim it's not one unified books. It's a gathering of stories. Yeah, it's a codex of stories of the prophets. It's called the Israeliyat, and I would have loved for this to be more important. Because now, I mean, for example, I watch videos by a Muslim cleric, and he talks about the Quran versus the Bible. He talks about Israel. He talks about Zionism. And I think, okay, some of the things he says about defending the Quran, or for example, saying why is the Quran has advantages in its interpretation of prophetic tradition. Why, for example, the story of the prophet Yusuf, like Joseph, is better in the Quran than in the Bible. And I can say, yeah, as a Muslim, I agree with him there. But when I hear him talk about Zionism and Judaism, I see, no, this is bullshit. I'm sorry, this is not wrong. You don't know. You don't understand Judaism at all. You don't understand Zionism. You believe in ideas that are completely come from your own mind. Your view of Zionism is a complete projection. It's a projection of what you want yourself. Yeah, and I can see this, what I talked about. For him, Zionism is a religious foil. Zionism is the opposite of Islam. Islam will bring salvation to the world, and Zionism is the big counter project. And this is an old idea that comes from Christianity. It's an old anti-Jewish idea from Christianity that was secularized into modern anti-Semitism. The Jews are the opposite of good in the world. The Jews are what prevents a better world from happening. That's the core of anti-Semitism. Israelis can change that. They can't. They can keep open to the possibility that it could change. For example, and they can also not play along with this game. So, for example, I would say Israelis, I mean, the idea of anti-Semitism rests on the idea that the Jews are bad people. And this was obviously a lie in the diaspora, because the diaspora, the Jewish diaspora, was not all powerful. The Jews in the diaspora were powerful. They could be murdered with impunity. They did not rule the world. Anti-Semitism was an obvious lie. But the state of Israel is a state, a very, very powerful state with a power of life over life and death of millions of people. And I know that quite a few Israelis are enthusiastic about this. They see this as the ultimate redemption of Jewish history. They think they're in a rush of power, and they think, yes, after we were mistreated for thousands of years, for millennia, now we can show them. We can show them our power. This is bad, and also it also means a state can actually be bad. Yeah, the Jewish diaspora cannot be like the anti-Semites say, and the anti-Semites, of course, are also not right about Israel, but Israel can be a bad. It can do bad things. It can do bad things to non-Jews, and this is also a possibility Israelis need to keep in mind. And Israel as the Israelis need to check themselves significantly more if they're not abusing their power than the Jewish diaspora ever did. And even in an anti-Semitic world, yeah. Actually, again, probably I'm thinking in a very like post-Christian, secularized, liberal way here, but two wrongs don't make a right. Israelis should try to avoid doing bad things just because the other side are doing them. Yeah, I read this quite often from Israelis, that they say, why should we continue to believe in humanitarian ideals when they are used as a weapon against us all the time? When humanitarian organizations, and I would agree with many of those criticisms, humanitarian ideas have often been abused against Israel. But if Israelis stop believing in them, well, they won't do anything but make the accusations true in a way. And because I personally believe in those ideas, yeah, of humanitarianism and liberal humanitarianism, then I would say, no, this is very bad. Yeah.
Definitely. So another robust question. You were speaking during your presentation about when you were speaking about Muslims, about how they would be Zionists if they were in the shoes of the Jews. And you came with the classical examples for the Holocaust and the massacres that happened in Europe. And I think that basically that was the messages by the early years of the State of Israel, by the Israeli leadership to the world, both the Western world and the Muslim world. Basically, the messages said there was a Holocaust. We came because of the Holocaust. We had nowhere else to go. Of course, we should discuss the Holocaust. But it was the same argumentation that I think you used in your presentation to understand something that is very similar to I would say, the thief who took one loaf of bread and said, but I'm not a bad person, I was hungry. And this person can be excused. Maybe it's a lot more complicated if he wants to be excused by the bakery owner. Maybe it's a lot more complicated if the bakery owner actually don't have many bread loaves, but this is like his entire belonging. But what I wanted to ask you is about the other possibility, because in a scenario that sometimes I imagine to myself, but I'm probably the only one in the world. Israel could have been founded by predominantly Jews, or the leadership could have been Jews that came from Muslim countries. and had
I see what you mean.
better understanding of Islam and some knowledge of Arabic that the people that came from Europe didn't understand at all. And maybe
I will write this idea down. Yeah, I need to write it. Go on. I'm just writing this idea down while you speak. Yeah. Go on. I'm listening.
Okay. So you want to continue?
No, go on. I'm just writing it down. I'm just typing while you're speaking.
Sure.
Go on.
So maybe they would say, and also in Arabic, and also to the Western world, maybe they would say, we came back to our ancestral land that we were praying to 3,000 years ago, the land of our grandfather Abraham, and the land that was actually prescribed to us by the Quran, by the prophecy of Muhammad, the words of Allah in the Quran. And maybe then this first impression, this first connection between the Jews and the Muslims in the revived country of Israel could have been going to a different path if that was the case?
Maybe, but Arab nationalism already existed. Christian anti-Semitism already existed. The Islamic idea that Muslims should rule already existed. It would have been very hard, but it would have been probably, maybe that would have changed something. Some of the earliest Arab responses to Zionism actually were a lot less negative than later, and actually did speak about the Jewish roots in this land. So early Arab reactions to Zionism never denied the Jewish roots in Palestine. Never. It didn't exist. It only started to appear basically in the 1930s as an idea, under the influence also of Nazi propaganda, not last. That everything the Jews say is a lie. Even that they're originally from Palestine, from Eretz Israel, even that is a lie. Yeah. So the idea everything Jews say must be a lie because they're Jews. This wasn't there. I mean, of course there was anti-Jewish stereotypes there, but this radical European anti-Semitic idea didn't exist in Arab culture to this point. Yeah, that's a very interesting idea. Let me give you two counterexamples. So this is very interesting. When you say we stole the loaf of bread because we had to, it's very interesting. Actually, this is something I don't demand of Israelis to believe in this narrative. I don't demand that Israelis agree that Zionism was like this and we were thieves, but we had to because of the Holocaust. I don't demand this, but I sometimes use something similar when I speak to Muslims. So with Muslim school students in Germany, I did some lectures and seminaries for Muslim school students in Germany. With them, I sometimes use a similar idea. Like it's very primitive, very plump, and it's not historically 100% true, but it worked pretty well, I think. It was that I would say, look, how do we explain this conflict? Europeans were assholes. They were anti-Semites and nationalists, and they tortured the Jews. So the Jews did react also a bit like assholes. They came to Palestine and said, this is our land now. But so far, all the Muslim students will agree with me. All of them. Okay. Nobody will deny it. Nobody of them will say, no, but the Nazis were right about the Jews. At least I have never experienced this. But then I would say, but how did the Palestinians react? They also reacted a bit like assholes. They adopted Nazi notions about the Jews, the Nazi propaganda, and they also became radical nationalists and didn't want to. And I would say the best possibility of this would have if the Palestinians had been a bit more welcoming. Actually, I agree. Not because I say yes, they had the absolute duty to do so, but because I say people should always try to do good. Yeah, I don't care if I can understand. I can actually understand. I can understand Palestinian anti-Zionism very well, but I still would like to do better than just the one I can understand. And this is what I tell to school classes, which is kind of like going with, but also against this idea of stealing the bread. Because I can also say that the baker, maybe again, I'm here speaking in a very post-Christian way. Of course, the very post-Christian. Because I say post-Christian, what is post-Christian? It means the values of Christianity secularized into politics. Yeah. If you think that a politician should act like Jesus, that's kind of like, that's very, very much the basis of Western current liberalism. Yeah. Just imagine when you understand Western liberalism, politicians who think they should act like Jesus in a way. Of course, it doesn't work. The world doesn't work like this. And you will have all kinds of contradictions, and they will still act like politicians, but they might think they should act like Jesus, or at least follow this ideal presented in public. But this is one thing. The other thing is that I think a problem also in Israel is that under the impression of Palestinian rejectionism, but also of the right-wing-ward shift of Israeli society, and I notice this very often, many Israelis don't even understand the Palestinian narrative at all anymore. Someone like Harkabi or Ben-Gurion, or even Jabotinsky, of course, in this Iron Wall article, they absolutely understood the Palestinian perspective. Now I see many Israelis who really think the Arabs are a mix of weird newcomer colonizers who didn't live here, who took the land away from us. Yeah, so how many Israelis believe that actually the Arabs were the ones who took the land from the Jews, who don't know about the Romans so well? I have met those Israelis. And sometimes, I mean, even Bibi Netanyahu said it once. I mean, he knows better, but he said it once in a podcast. Yeah, probably he was misspeaking, but probably it was like a Freudian slip in a way that he said the Arabs took the land from us. Of course, he knows better, but you see my point. And they think the Palestinians are actually just like some Arabs who came to steal our land, which is kind of like an inversion of the Palestinian narrative, just for the fact that it is, well, historically, I would even say even the Palestinian narrative is a bit more true than that, because, I mean, the Palestinians were living there and the Zionists came. But my point now is, and then I was meeting a very nice young Jewish woman in Jerusalem. I was in East Jerusalem. I was in an Arab quarter of Jerusalem, lived for a month just recently, and I met a nice at the Davidka Square in a bakery. I met a nice young Jewish couple, and the young woman wanted to know all about my activism. And then she said, "What was that again in the 90s when they wanted to take a part of Israel and give it to the Arabs?" And then her boyfriend said, "Yeah, it was this was called the two-state solution." So I don't even demand of Israelis to believe in the two-state solution, but I say, when you don't even know anymore what's the concept, you're so far removed from understanding Palestinians. Or to you, and I have to be a bit harsh here. Then we go to people like Einat Wilf, who's basically the intellectual version of the same narrative. Yeah, her understanding of the Palestinian identity is so low that she basically invents an idea of what Palestinianism, she calls it, where she basically says Palestinianism has no other identity but to kill Jews or to deny the Jews a state. Yeah, there might be something to that, but the reason is not that they just hated Jews. The reason is that they said, well, we just live here. This is our country. Why should we share it with newcomers? Which is a very normal impulse. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much again. I will give the crowd another opportunity to ask something if you're interested. And on the background, I'll ask you, I asked you before, what do you think Israel should do in order to get more support from your community? And now I will ask you the exact opposite question. What do you think Israel should not do or should avoid of? Well, you know the situation is complex, but what kind of things would you avoid from in order to get more support from the Palestinian or Muslim community?
Well, many Israelis say that the only thing Arabs respect is strength, and so the Arabs will actually, for example, there was a long article by the analyst Rafi Dimogi, I think that's how I might pronounce his name, on Mosaic magazine, a very long article, actually almost a book, how the only thing everybody actually respects is strength. I think he's a bit projecting from himself. Everybody only respects strength, especially Arabs, and so actually Israel should be as harsh as possible. And he said, paradoxically, the Arabs will like Israel more if it's as harsh as possible. I think this is actually not true, because this follows the belief that Israel has been very soft with Arabs, which is not how Arabs see it, and which is also not historically true at all. So many, on the other hand, it might work. It might work in a way that if you just kill enough Arabs, then the Arabs will at one point stop attacking Israel, because of course Arabs also care about their children, not just about killing Jews. But I would think this is a very bad vision for the future. And what I think is that Israel should avoid trying to become a global symbol of being very good at killing, because this is where Israel is currently just going. And I know there are some people who very offensively support this idea. They say, so for example, Amos Oz wrote a few decades ago that one of the worst things about the Israeli right is that they have abandoned the idea that the Jews should be a light upon the people. They have abandoned all Jewish idealism on the Israeli right. They say we're just like everybody else, life is a fight, and now we're fighting, and we don't believe that we have anything to teach the world. That might have been true for some secular right-wingers decades ago, but now in Israel you even have right-wingers who say Israel is a light upon the nations, and our skill that we show to the world is killing. I mean, I'm exaggerating a bit, but we see the beginning of such phenomena. What Israel should show the world is the values of radical egocentrism, of ruthless treating of enemies, of not giving an inch, and of destroying what you see as evil, but not by transforming it into something better, but by physically annihilating it. Of course, you can always refer to the Nazis as the example where this actually worked. But, well, I mean, do the Israelis want to engage in a rebuilding of Gaza the way the Allies did in West Germany? No, they don't. Yeah, so this is not a very good comparison. This is actually the kind of comparison, this is actually the kind of argument I was making. So if you want to look for historical comparisons of what I said before about the Islamic University in Gaza and rebuilding and fighting the struggle and everything, this would be actually a much better comparison, you know. Just that I think there are many factors internal to Israel, external to the world that might prevent this. So I would like Israel not to become a global symbol of just power and killing and strength. And also the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords are very good when they go against, fight against Israel as the founding myth of Islamism and Arab nationalism. If they say, no, we chose stability, prosperity, and cooperation over eternal struggle for whatever national honor, national redemption, that's very good. Wonderful, perfect. But the Abraham Accords can't just be like the strong rule and the weak are ruled. So, for example, Azerbaijan is also an example. I saw many Israelis being very positive about the peace treaty signed between Azerbaijan and Armenia, saying, yes, this is how it should always go. The strong win and the weak accepted. Yeah, but I mean, that's nihilism, basically. Yeah, that's nihilism, because you can't, of course, when you say Israel's war in Gaza, that's moral clarity. Well, the Azerbaijani war in Karabakh, that was not moral clarity. You might say that this was actually Azerbaijani territory and Armenia illegally occupied it, yeah? But that was not moral clarity with the expulsion of the Armenians and all of this, you know? But it was actually, but I saw many very positive reactions from Israelis about it and saying, yeah, this is a good role model. This is how it should work. The strong rule and the weak. Yeah, but you know, this was also what the Nazis were thinking. The Nazis were thinking the world is ruled by strength and we rule because we're strong. And you might say, of course, the Nazis lost, but I mean, look what they did to the Jews in the meantime when they were strong. I don't want to compare Israel to the Nazis, but I want to say that a nihilist mindset in which strength is right, might is right, has historically not served the Jews very well. I don't see any reason to believe why it would forever change now. I mean, probably if you're a messianic national Zionist, you believe that now we're entering the messianic age and Jewish strength is supported by Hashem, and there's no way this will ever change again, then I will not do anything to change your mind. If you're a convinced Islamist who believes that God has personally ordered you to liberate Al-Quds, I will also not be able to change your mind, probably. But I would say that this is not the future I want.
Okay, so to start to wrap it up, usually for ending, I ask my guests, first of all, to add whatever they think they should have been saying, but didn't have the chance.
No, that's not the case.
Okay, so, but another surprising opportunity, is to give, if you want to give you the opportunity to ask me or ask the Israeli side a question.
Yes. Yes, I would like to do that.
Let's go.
What is the best future scenario that you see for the people of Gaza? What would you wish? What would your if you look to your heart, but not to the angry part, if you look to the good parts of your heart, because our heart is important, but our heart can also harbor the nafs. In Islamic philosophy, we believe that our heart the nafs can harbor good emotion, but also bad emotion. Try to go with your gut feeling, with your heart, but with the positive part. What should be a future for the people of Gaza?
My personal reaction would be that I hope that they will be free from Hamas and will live in peace and prosperity.
Mm-hmm.
But it will probably take a process, and I think that the questions over there are about it's about the people, it's about the leadership, it's about how the war will be handled on the ground, but it's also about the infrastructure. And it's very visible that I would say vast parts of Gaza are no longer inhabitable, and even if you look at the wreckage, it will take years to do something that will create proper housing. This, I think, it's a major question. The world, instead of looking at it as it is, I mean, where are those people going to live? The world has made it into some sort of political argument on their backs, whether they should be allowed to leave or shouldn't be allowed to leave, and if they will leave, what will it mean to the Arab dignity, etc., etc., etc. But it's uninhabitable. So either we expect them to stay and to die on concrete wreckage, or they should be living voluntarily, or some of them, or many parts of them, maybe temporarily, maybe some will be back, maybe some won't go back. I personally, I'm not sharing the Israeli interest in this process, because it's very obvious to me that obviously many Gazans will immigrate, but also obviously not all of them will immigrate. And statistically speaking, what will probably happen, as in most places in the Middle East, is that the people that will immigrate will be the people that are looking for solutions in their lives rather than looking for violence and confrontations. So it's a tactical thing. I'm sorry for innocent civilians that they basically lost their homes, and I think that no one can give them answers about where they're going to sleep tomorrow morning or something like that. But I think that, and as a personal interpretation, coming to think about what all the global powers are speaking in the back rooms, and the obvious fact that something here is intertwined between security reasons and economical considerations that have a lot to do with the desire of the Gulf countries to get a direct pipeline or a canal to export the oil to Europe, probably through the Gaza Canal. So I personally won't be surprised at all in the end of the day we will discover that it was an economical project embedded in a regional war, and we will see the Gaza Canal or parts of Gaza being dug into a canal parallel to the Suez Canal. but that's a very specific geopolitical forecast on my behalf.
Okay.
But I think that on a personal note, as someone who lives in southern Israel, and for the last almost more than, yes, to give or take 20 years, has been living under rockets from Hamas, we were, I don't know how aware you are of it or if you see it the same as I do, we were caught in a pattern of having a violent clash every 2 years, almost exactly. And even that it wasn't referred to as wars formally, there were wars. And in every one of the rounds, it seems to me from my very biased perspective, but not only to me, that it was like almost finishing the job in terms of removing Hamas from power, getting very close to a set of circumstances that could create Hamas removal from power and another leadership, another Palestinian leadership that will emerge from tribal forces, from forces like Dahlan or Abu Shbab or other actors. And I think that this time, not speaking as if it's my position, but more of an analysis, I think that this time Israel will see it through the end, meaning not the end of Hamas as an organization, because that's impossible, but the end of Hamas as a ruling class in Gaza.
Yeah, obviously, I think it's pretty clear that I'm not a fan of Hamas ruling there. Hamas wants to, I mean, this is a literal quote. They want to sacrifice Gaza for the Islamic Ummah. I think that's a terrible and perverted way of interpreting Islam. Yeah, I don't believe in a positive future for Gaza with Hamas. But when I read, for example, I read an article by an Israeli geographer who's a professor at Bar Ilan University, who wrote that Gaza is uninhabitable, cannot be ever lived in again because of whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then in the end, he says, but Gaza should be in ruins forever as a monument for those who dare to raise their hand against the Jews. So that makes it pretty obvious that everything he said before is a lie. He doesn't even care. He doesn't. I mean, even if it's true, it's a lie. You see what I mean? Even if all what he said about the geography is true, it's obvious that he's really just interested in it for personal reasons. Yeah. So like in the movie 12 Angry Men, there's a quote where someone says, "You don't want to convict this criminal because he's actually guilty, even if he might be guilty, but you don't care." Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, my friend, thank you very much for this commando lecture. It was very impressive, and I think that we all have a lot to learn and to think of. I hope you will have a good evening with all the complications, and that everything will turn out for the best. And I will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
just before I came into the house with the fire damage, I picked up my mother from the hospital. And now I will go back to her. Yes. Okay,
Crazy
thank you
days.
for inviting me. Yes. Thank you for inviting me, Tom. Thank you for listening to me for such a long time. Thank you for the input and for the question also to the audience. And yeah, have a nice evening, right?
And my prayers with your mother.
Thank you.
you, my friend.
Thank you. Goodbye.